Who cares what I think?
Moonjumper here with another sub-episode of Who Cares What I Think. The other day I completed a 3-part deep dive analysis of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1. And long story short, I loved it. Good night, everybody. No, the whole point of these sub-episodes is to provide some shorter targeted clips of a full episode or episodes so that you can briefly get a sense of my way of thinking, and maybe you'll end up carrying what I think just enough to check out the full episodes, which tend to be around, 20 or 30 minutes. Before I did the big 3-part review, Who Cares What I Think Episode 7, Parts 1, 2, and 3, I had previously done a review of the Lower Decks trailer, that was Episode 6, back before Lower Decks, an animated comedy set in the Star Trek universe, premiered on CBS All Access. So at the time, it was all speculation what we were going to be getting. And after several years of Kurtzman Trek, there was a lot of skepticism among fans, to say the least, myself included. Nonetheless, I was intrigued how an animated comedy featuring Starfleet's working class down in the bowels of a starship would play out. According to various promotional materials, this was going to be a show about the least important crew members aboard the least important starship in Starfleet. That the Cerritos and her crew would be anything but the prestigious Enterprise. The concept reminded me of a series of Sierra video games I used to play back in the 90s titled Space Quest, and featured a character named Roger Wilco, a goofy but underappreciated space janitor in a Starfleet-like organization. If you can find them and still manage to play them on a modern computer, maybe via DOSBox, they're a hilarious series of games. But the disconnect I was sensing in Lower Decks before it premiered, and even afterwards, even though I loved the series, an early nitpick I had is one I feel still applies, namely that the Cerritos and her crew seem just a little too impressive to be the least important ship in the fleet. Comparing Star Trek Lower Decks to Roger Wilco in Space Quest. Roll the tape. The ship, the USS Cerritos. Anti-Trekker says it looks like a picnic table. And yeah, it is kind of weird looking, kind of ugly, but given the theme of the series, at the very least, it's a formidable looking ship of the line. It just doesn't come across to me as the least important ship in the fleet. If these guys, even the entire ship and crew, are supposed to be the underdogs of Starfleet, to me, it would have been much more effective to come up with the smallest, crappiest starship they could, like an old beat-up Miranda class, but not even that good. Something that crewmen on the big prestige ships would make fun of, and that would be the point. The little ship that could. The little crew of misfits that could. It would be along the same lines as that old video game series I used to play, Roger Wilco, the Space Quest series, which was a Star Trek and sci-fi in general spoof that featured a little guy and a group of sidekicks who were in a Starfleet-like organization, except they were space janitors put in charge of a crappy little garbage scow, but they're the ones who end up saving the galaxy. That's what this should be. And secondly, why are the main characters ensigns? An ensign is the lowest level commissioned officer. But if these are the true underdogs cleaning waste down in the lower bowels of the ship, it would be a lot more effective for them to be enlisted crewmen. They shouldn't be officers at all. They should be grunts. This is kind of an ongoing trope in Star Trek for decades. We know that enlisted crewmen in Starfleet exist. They are occasionally referred to in dialogue. You do see them walking around the Enterprise in jumpsuits or specialized gear instead of officer uniforms. And we actually do have one main character who actually is an enlisted member of Starfleet. He is not a commissioned officer, and that's Chief O'Brien. Don't call me sir, I work for a living. We've heard him say that a number of times. He's the blue-collar class of Starfleet. But Trek writers have a tendency to forget these enlisted guys and gals pilots exist. Everyone is an officer. Everyone is at least an ensign, and that ignores a huge portion, probably the majority of your crew. If these characters are supposed to be the true underclass down in the lower decks, they shouldn't even be ensigns. They ought to be enlisted. That looks like a couple of missed opportunities that would have helped set this underdog crew apart from everything we've already seen. The same old Starfleet bridge officers aboard the best ships of the fleet. This should have been the opposite of that. The underdogs of Starfleet aboard the crappiest ship in Starfleet, saving the day despite it all. But we'll see how it plays out. And you can find out how it played out, in my humble opinion, by watching my 3-part in-depth analysis of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1. You can find those links at the end of this video or down in the description below. Until next time, I am Moonjumper.
Who cares what I think?